Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everyone had a good Friday. I know it was like an apocalypse in the market, but hopefully I've shown everybody and taught everybody, and even just like having some common sense on position allocation. And on top of that, me just like telling you guys to be trimming into strength on a lot of positions. Even if you know it hits a target and you think you can go further, it's important to just have target to target trades or general ideas of where you want to be taking profits or getting principal out to be able to let it be like a risk-free trade. I took off path right where I said I was going to, like leading into 1830. Sure, I missed a few bucks or like even a couple cents above that. Intel, I will say Intel went to 3970, which was a target. I didn't trim right here. I kind of trimmed going into the lower end of it after the market was starting to sell. But still, I mean, I did essentially a target to target trade on that one. We will talk about this here in a second because I still think this could be in like a phase E. Shout out to Rogery in the Discord, kind of brought that to my attention. But I definitely trimmed this on top of that to kind of mitigate QCOM as well, right? QCOM, no doubt I'm in drawdown in, guys. I did say this is going to be a bigger position leading into kind of its earnings date. Beginning phases like 1%, 2% of my total account. I'm right around like 10, 15 contracts, which isn't super crazy. I could still fit like, probably like another 15, 20 in there comfortably. Probably more now that this has gotten undercut quite a bit. But this is a weird chart, right? Like if we take a look at this, I really don't know. I was kind of looking at like the weekly 9 and 20. You guys saw me posting about that. Obviously, we undercut that a little bit, but then if we go into, like just like the daily here and we take a look at the 50-day, that's like right around here, like 159. But the one thing I saw too was like the 200-day, right? 200-day was kind of something I was hoping that we'd get. Let's make it orange real quick. Was something like we'd catch. I thought like if we could maybe bounce off of this progression gap down here at like 153.11 and not go below 151.31, that this has opportunity to either open up near the 200 or like kind of bounce off of this general range here, reclaim the 200, maybe start like a little bit of a trend, get back above 159, which is this progression gap from back here, and then maybe start to trend back up into like 161, 164. And then if that happens, right, I think that this chart looks good again, right? We have to kind of remember that this like little these like series of lower highs over here, this little resistance, is still an important spot, like 162 to 163. I've had that marked for some time. It's just not as important now as some of these critical supports a little bit lower, right? And just to kind of reference it and go back really quickly, you guys know I talked about the accumulation, right, that occurred in this range here, right? Yada yada yada. You guys have heard me talk about this time and time again. So that big thick green line at 151 is important, and then we have smaller progression gaps at 153 and then a reclaim at 159, right? So, and the reason I don't want to like close out of this, guys, is because like I did the same thing during MU, guys. You guys remember MU? Like this, I knew where this chart was going to go. I knew this was going to be a big trade, and then it had that sweep out candle, right? And then I stopped out, and this was an aggressive bar, but really it was just a capitulation kind of event, right? Like a vol event, as we say. QQQ, we can kind of go reference that as well. Like same exact thing, guys. Like massive accumulation that was forming. We had a capitulation that followed. Some of the highest volume that we've seen, where we had the change of hands, right? Where weak buyers are now sellers and they're panicking and getting rid of their positions. You have that being paired with buyers of those sells, right, and the kind of matching of that counterparty. And then we can validate that with the VIX, right? VIX back in April, guys, absolute spike, right? This was obviously a much larger one. As you guys can see, like kind of like this area 16 to, I don't know, 60 was like a 250% move. But we can validate it's somewhat of a flight away from equities, right? A flight into either cash or maybe the VIX itself, just people panicking and selling out of the market, right? We can see that this clearly had like a 35-40% move on Friday. So that kind of pairs with my new idea of where I really kind of want to start to look long on Qs, guys, if I'm being completely honest. This has massive volume here, and this could be the start of a distribution, right? We've talked about this where, you have a bottoming event like this, and then it starts to mark up, and it's pretty much been doing it on low volume for the most part, where we have, some gap up days that give us higher volume peaks, but we really haven't I would say the only downside I could see this is we haven't retested the 4 or 539 all-time high breakout. And I've been saying that this is like potentially a distribution on like a larger time frame. I'm not too sure what now. But I don't think it happens that quickly, right? I don't think that this will just sell straight down to 539. I could be wrong, but there are some warning signs here. But I do think that this is, if this is going to be a bubble, that it's going to take multiple moves in high volume prints here to really, I would say, get rid of everything they accumulated through these lows here and then through the April bottom. It is going to be, a distribution takes some time, guys, and it's going to be an event that takes a little bit of time. So really still keeping in mind the December OPEX, kind of like the weakness that I was saying that could happen in September, could happen in October, would be front ran and bought up for that move into November, December, January, right? That front run typically happens and is currently happening, in my opinion, off of this downside move here. So really what I just want to see, I guess, all in all, is, I don't know if you guys saw, but the close was technically here, but after hours moved down to 583.32. So maybe we catch a bid off of 583 in the 50-day here. If that were to happen, I think there could be an entry off of that right away. So I would kind of like to see, maybe a gap down. And if you guys didn't see here, and like after hours, it bounced off of this. So it bounced off the 50-day. Maybe on Monday, we sell back down, maybe come a little bit under, reclaim it, something like that. Or what ends up happening too, because I don't think we're going to gap up, guys, if I'm being completely honest. Usually a move like this doesn't result in a move up over the weekend. So I'm expecting an NWOG gap down, right? So what does that mean? Accumulation on the gap down. So if we end up opening lower here, like I said, maybe off 583. There's a couple unfilled gaps in this upper range, so maybe we come down to 576, right? 576 would be a spot. If we end up kind of coming to 565, I think these are all good areas to potentially look for a long, and it would bring risk to reward to a much lucrative level, right? Like contracts would be super cheap for December, January for a move back to 610, but ultimately I think this ends up coming back to 610. It's kind of one of my top trades here I'm going to be looking for. Just depends on where we open, how deep we end up opening. Like I said, 583 is the preferred spot. If we end up gapping up, which I don't expect us to, but if we do end up kind of gapping up, or let's say we bounce off 583, I would be looking for us to base this progression gap, and then obviously Friday's low coincides with that really nicely. So maybe like a pullback here would be an entry, and then look for a trade all the way back up into 610. But it really kind of just comes down to where we open, guys. I can't give too much other than that. I mean, I have no idea. This chart has been pretty much slow grinding up, very, very slow, very, very slow. It hasn't provided too much edge, but all I know is that there's opportunity here on this now, so it's just important about seeing where we open and then watching daily volume bars, weekly volume bars. If there is going to be a snapback rally, I think it's going to be less than 2 months, so I think this could happen very, very quickly. But it's important to see where we end up opening. If we do see some kind of NWOG accumulation, that will surely show on like the 15 hourly and the daily, and we'll kind of know where the bottom's at. But yeah, that's going to be one of my main focuses, guys. I really genuinely think that this is like a gift from, like, I don't know, whoever, but back in April, right, I've told you guys, I felt like I fumbled that. I had so many contracts, and if I would have held the 565, I would have made like 1.5 million. I walked away with like 40K, and I still feel sick about that every single day. And I feel like now, finally, 6 months later, we get some kind of an opportunity here to really push this back to the long or the upside, and then maybe from there we could see a distribution, right? And the reason I keep bringing up distribution, guys, and like I know some people are probably so tired of it, but it takes so long, guys. Like if we take a look here, and this is so crazy, like I posted this on Twitter, we had like I'd say like the weekly buy climax back here, right? So remember, these all play into different time frames on each other. So we had the weekly buy climax here. We kind of had the pullback here. I would say like this was the ST. We had the micro sign of weakness. We had an up thrust occur right here. So BC, up thrust, kind of another test here. And then you had a massive move up, right, which is your UTAD. But the UTAD ended up taking really long. Usually, sometimes this is just a 1 bar event and then it sells. But this ended up consolidating up here, which is really strange, right? But if we take a look within the weekly distribution, remember like the BC here, You have the up thrust here, and then we had a buy climax, or I'm sorry, the UTAD up here. Within that weekly time frame, it basically just took a daily distribution schematic for that to play out, right? Which is like so insane. Like now we had buy climax here, right? So let's just like follow through. Buy climax, we had up thrust, UTAD. And then it's going to target the bottom of the distribution zone, right, which is down there. If you guys take a look, this sold all the way to the bottom of that. Sold all the way to 61.75. So I don't like the reason I'm still kind of like a little bit worried about things is I could see this selling off pretty drastically still. I could see this now bouncing off. Like if this is truly a distribution, the market is going to rally a little bit. But this would come back up to 66.19, probably fill that gap down right from 61, and then come down lower again, retest the buy climax high and the up thrust and get back into that old range. And this is coming down to 58, right? And then potentially 54. I mean, dude, this has a lot of room to go. Then from there, 53. From there, 52. You see how they're making like a path of least resistance to the downside, guys? It is a little strange. I definitely am still kind of worried about Bitcoin. I'm seeing this all in retrospect. I mean, I was kind of tracking it, but you know, once it started to break out here, I just kind of stopped looking at it. I was looking for longs off of the bottom of this, and then still kind of looking near the highs, but I just took my eyes off of this one for a little bit. But I don't know. It's definitely back on the watch list where I am looking at, you know, if we can bounce off 61.75, do we trade up into 66.20, maybe like 66.50 or 65.8? What is this? Oh my God. What is the low here? Oh, 65.80. If we move up into that, does this give us an LPSY, right? Because this is 100% distribution now. I'm like, I can't be convinced otherwise. And if this does sell off, does it, you know, the equity sell with it? Does that money then go into like stocks, right? Does money start to leave Bitcoin and come back into stocks and then kind of propel the stock market up, and then we see a divergence between the two? I have no idea, but I am watching IBIT for continued distribution down into like 58, 54. I think that could be a huge opportunity, and it's finally kind of shown its hand. We just need to see if it bounces off of this. Like, we can even mark it from here. Where's my green bar? There we go. So like from the 61.94, 61.75, does it bounce all the way back up to 66? Just does it give us some kind of lower high off of this into the gap? And I think this comes down because this is disgusting. And then, you know, kind of looking at QQQ. What does QQQ do? Oh, that's QQQ. Where does it bounce off of? Does it bounce off the 50-day? You know, does it bounce off of 576? There's a lot in play here. I just need to see where it opens, and I kind of need to see some further data. But I am kind of looking for long on Qs into December, or like maybe November 21st for a shorter dated one. Back up into 610. I think this could be like 120%, 100% win, just depending on how quickly it does it. So Qs is still up there. Now, there's two other charts, guys, and I'm kind of glad the market sold off because it really narrowed my focus a lot. You know, I really still like UNH. UNH, guys, I haven't trimmed any shares on this one just because the sell-off wasn't too bad on this one, but it didn't quite fill the 378 gap, as you guys can see, but really all it did is it pulled back and it refilled this 350-372 gap here. You know, obviously I still think we're protected somewhat by 335. If we break under 335, I would close my shares just to take the win on that one. But just seeing how we can open up relative to 353.72. If we can bounce off of that, guys, I think that we can push to 380. If we start to sell under 335, I think that we come for the spring in the 3 lower low. I'm being completely honest. Yeah, this would be a long later on in time. Probably shares again and options, but you know, that's if the market really starts to capitulate and starts to sell. I could see this playing out. But as of right now, I just want to see if it can open off 350. And then Intel, guys, I mean, I don't have to say too much. I can just throw up the schematic kind of here, but really just kind of looks like this could be the phase D going into phase E. As long as it can hold and really process and digest this sell-off candle here, and maintain in this like 36.70, 36.37 spot, which was the close, right? If we can just hold into this gap here, I really think that this is just the SOS or LPS in that final phase before the markup, and this would be the last markup. And I really think the markup here could be from earnings, right? This would be the one that sends it up into 43, the one that sends it up into, if we have a gap here as well. That's the open. 1 second. Yeah, I mean, a move up into 44, possibly up into 49. I know that sounds crazy, but this could be the spot here. So maybe just like an earnings lotto position on, next week. We have earnings coming up Thursday, the 23rd. But as long as it can mitigate here and hold in this 36 to 37 gap, I do think that this is the final SOS here for some kind of position to be taking into the 41, 44 spot. I'd probably just trade 40 calls if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, this is kind of what I'm looking at here. I really still like this chart. I might have just I would say emotionally closed my position. As I said, I was trying to like mitigate against the QCOM position. But for the most part, I still think it looks good. And yeah, I'll probably be looking for a 40 call for, I would say like October 31st. So kind of a shorter dated one. There's always the possibility of getting IV crush there. So just got to be wary of that. Maybe take like 5, 10, maybe 1, just relative to your account, whatever it is that you guys use for positions into, very high risk stuff. I would just keep it around that realm. But yeah, this chart looks really good still. And that's really, I guess that's really all I got, guys. It's just, there was so many names. I felt like right before the sell-off, I could have gone with like 5, 10, 15 different names. Now it feels like it's nice because it got narrowed down to about 4. And if you guys always ask me, like, what would I go with in terms of position sizing? I really think QQQ is probably going to be the best bang for your buck, especially with a mean reversion like that, guys. Like, QCOM's obviously up there as well. QCOM is a little bit, November 5th is earnings, so that's kind of dependent on earnings, whereas I think QQQ could really start to move before the earnings itself and then be propelled by other tech earnings, if that makes sense, because we have a lot of earnings coming up in November, whereas this is solely, I think this is now solely dependent on earnings. So I would rather size into Qs right now. Wherever it ends up opening, if we get an NWOG accumulation, that's kind of where I'd be waiting for a bottom, waiting for some kind of volume signal showing the bottom there, start to get some trend development or structure development, and then reclaim of previous levels. As I said, like this 589.50 would be a big spot. A reclaim of the 20-day would be nice as well. Obviously, I think that would pull down and start coming to 590, so I'll be watching that. This would probably be a pretty big position for me, guys, where maybe I'd take like 100 cons if I'm being honest, and see if I can try to replicate that April effect. And then QCOM, if we can obviously bounce off 153, 151, just hold in this general area, and then we pop back above 159, I think I'll add back into that, or maybe there's higher volume that occurs here off of 153, 151. I'll start to add a couple more contracts into that, maybe 10 or 15, get to like 3 to 5. As I said, that's the percent allocation I'll use on this one. And then, like I said, UNH, probably looking for this one just to see what happens off 353. And then Intel, probably the back end, just because it's going to be an earnings lotto. So yeah, those are really the main two are just QQQ and QCOM. But QCOM definitely reliant on earnings, so QQQ probably going to be the number one watch, guys. I just like the way it looks. I like how this feels. It feels like a capitulation at the highs, and obviously this could result in further downside, but I think we move back up, and I said this in my tweet about bubbles. Bubbles don't pop on the first pullback, right? They don't do that. On the first big move, they'll typically go right back to the highs or give you some kind of a weak lower high. Then you'll see a more violent move to the downside, right? It's a big process here. So probably looking at, like I said, 610, November 21st or December, I think 19th, 610 contracts, and that will probably be the main one I'll be looking at. So that's going to be all, guys. I appreciate everybody. I'll see you guys on Monday. Don't be scared. Opportunity kind of, is in these moments, guys. Just make sure you're sizing correctly.